Hello again to another Agakale React, and today we'll be watching What Would Your Life Be Like If Axis Had Won World War II from Zvalid. I don't think I've seen anything from this man, but that's from October 2023, so it's not that long, and it's actually kind of interesting because, well, we'll just see how the life would be if the Axis
What
won.
would life, culture, art, and music be like with a German Reich that extend from Rhine to Moscow? The Second World War was won by the Axis. After the invasion of France in the summer of 1940, Hitler canceled Operation Barbarossa and chose to move south towards the Mediterranean Sea. North Africa became the main front, while the battle in the skies of Britain continues. The Rommel's Africa Corps was reinforced, and the full weight of the Luftwaffe is devastating. In January 1942, the Battle of El Alamein is won by Axis. Then the Suez Channel is taken. In spring 1942, Spain is invaded. Spain, after the Civil War, is really weak, and the Spanish have not even the will to fight their former allied, knowing that after the war, they will leave Gibraltar to Spain. After the fall of Gibraltar, the Mediterranean is sealed. Malta and Cyprus surrendered. From Egypt, the Axis forces advanced in the Middle East, with Iraq and Palestine in full revolt against the British occupation. There is a need of a relatively small numbers of ground troops, and the resources are sent by sea, being now the Mediterranean and Axis Sea. Turkey joined Axis, partly for the promises of land expansion and partly to avoid the fate of Spain. In December 1941, the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor, and U.S. declares war on Japan. Germany and Italy left Japan to fight the U.S. alone. There is not the absurd declaration of war on USA. In June 1942, Operation Barbarossa started a pincer operation that squeezed Russia from the west and from Caucasus. In this situation, the Soviets had an extra year to reorganize the Red Army after the purges, as well as absorbing formidable new equipment such as the T-34 tank. But on the other hand, the superior German tactical and operational skills, as well as greater combat experience, gave Axis the edge in the battle. And another year gave Axis more time to exploit the resources of conquered Europe and Middle East. Moscow fell in spring 1943, then Stalingrad, soon followed by Leningrad. The Red Army is now behind the Urals. With the USA still neutral in the European war, they already had the war they need. The British were forced to search a peace with Axis. In 1944, a peace conference ends the war. Without the involvement of USA, this war was not a world war, but became something like the 135th European War. The USA-Japan War ended in 1947, with another half a dozen of atomic bombs, the invasion of Japan, and an American victory. The American losses during the land invasion of Japan were close to 1 million men. After the end of the war, the world is divided in two camps. The Allied world, centered on the US and UK, which dominate most of Asia and America, and a Nazi-fascist European League with strong influence in Africa and Middle East. A Cold War between the two blocs soon starts. In the following years, Hitler and Mussolini remain the leaders of their countries. Pétain, then Lavey, are the leaders of France, close to the Axis. Most of Europe have pro-Axis governments. In the eastern countries under the German influence,
go back. Did they actually give land to Poland too?
Most of Europe.
Yeah, they did. Look at this, guys. Here. Very small. It's always something. It's surprising turn of events. I don't think that would actually happen if
Europe have pro-Axis governments. In the eastern countries under the German influence, there is discontent, especially in the Moskova, where large areas are still beyond the control of the German army. Behind the Urals, there is the Soviet Russia. Khrushchev became the Soviet Union first secretary. The truce between the Soviets and Germany is tense. There has not been any official peace between the two contenders. The borderline in the Urals is not even well defined. This permanent state of war costs Germany several resources, but Hitler sees it as a kind of advantage.
Yeah, Hitler's still
Every
alive.
empire needs an enemy since the Roman times. In the Far East, Japan loses all its foreign territories. Korea is united under American influence.
Okay.
China is split in half
Oh,
in a
okay, China's
Korean-style
split.
situation.
Okay.
The North is communist. The South is under Chiang Kai-shek. India becomes independent in 1947. Subhas Chandra Bose is the Indian Prime Minister of an India quite friendly with Axis. Several countries have the atomic bomb. This is the political situation around
Yes, you do.
1960. What would
I mean-
life be like in such a world? The Nazi fascist-dominated Europe maintains the characteristics of the dictatorial societies. No elections, control of newspapers, magazines, books, radio. It is illegal to criticize the government.
Obviously.
However, the victory in the war brought great consensus toward the leaders. There are huge military parades
they won.
and other
That's why.
demonstrations with large
Shadow,
influx
I can't
of people.
see you in front of the TV.
Indeed, people in West Europe,
monitor,
and
actually.
especially in Germany, live a comfortable life, own vehicles, houses, has jobs, could afford some luxuries. How would be the music? In the Anglo-Saxon countries, the music would be almost the same as in our timeline. Jazz
What?
stars are Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis, and Ella Fitzgerald. Rock and roll emerges with Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and others. In Europe, the popular music is essentially the continuation of the previous decade, with a conventional and symphonic style of music. The German folk music revival became a phenomenon in Europe. In the 50s, the rock and roll proved to be difficult to be
Shadow.
accepted in Europe, and there are accusations of it being an American orchestrated scheme to corrupt the youth. Obviously, the same happens to European music in the USA.
Hey,
Marlene
hey,
Dietrich
hey.
is appreciated in both Europe and America, but she's one of the few. The music will find a way to cross the borders. Since 1938 in German Reich, there were exhibitions of degenerate music, featuring Jewish composers, jazz, and other subjects, to show German people how inferior and decadent was that music. But not all the people disliked this style of music. The
Of course.
exhibitions only act as an introduction to the kind of music the government disapproves. And in 1960, degenerate music, entartet music, simply identify the new Anglo-Saxon music. It is no longer viewed negatively. Despite the official disapproval of the government, more people enjoy it. Even several high-ranking SS officers gladly frequent jazz clubs present across Germany, even in Berlin itself. The ABBA would be different, or not existing at all. Annie Fried Lyngstad was born to Norwegian mother and a German sergeant. In our timeline, these children were ostracized, and her mother immigrated to Sweden. In this timeline, Annie Fried remains in Norway. Fanta dominate the European market, becoming the cultural icon Coca-Cola is. Fanta was originated in Germany and Italy as a Coca-Cola substitute. Fanta name derived from fantasy, German language. Germany wins 1950 and 1954 Soccer World Cup.
Okay.
In 1955, Hitler and Eva Braun have a state wedding, making their marriage known to the public with a great spectacle, rivaling a British royal wedding. In 1958, Hitler visited USA. Cinema. In 1960, the German production of propaganda film almost disappears. Propaganda is mainly done through television programs. The television technology is far more advanced. Most German households own a TV set. The government prohibits the presentation of foreign films. But movies considered artistically valuable are allowed, as the epic Ben-Hur in 1959 and Walt Disney's animated films. Zara Leander is one of the most important actresses in German films. In Europe, we have Jean-Paul Belmondo, Brigitte Bardot, Fellini, Sophia Loren, Mastroianni, as in our timeline.
Of course.
The
they still
architecture.
exist.
After the war, Berlin has been rebuilt by Albert Speer. The Volkshalle, a building with a 290 meters high dome. The Führer's Palace, the Third Reich Chancellery, the Triumphal Arch, the München Hauptbahnhof. This neo-classical monumental architecture style is copied all around Europe. There is a need to trade resources and goods throughout Europe, so the Breitspurbahn, a 3 meters wide-gauge railway with double-decker carriages, stretches from Paris to Moscow. It was a Hitler dream since 1942.
3 meter?
The level of technology in 1960 is slightly more advanced than in our timeline, particularly chemistry and physics, which lead to advancements in automotive and aeronautics. Small portable radios are common. The world's first digital computer, the Z3, is not destroyed by an Allied bombing in 1944. The research continues, making Germany a leader in the relay's computers. On October 1953, from their base at Peenemünde, the Germans launched the first artificial Earth satellite. Then they send the first human to space on 1957. In 1960, the Germans are the only ones that have ICBM and solid-fueled SLBM's missiles capable of being launched from
taking
submarines.
account that a lot of scientists
Nazi
in
Germany is a
NASA that
decade
were
ahead
built
of
for
any
the
other nation
Apollo
in this field.
were actually from
The
Germany.
first civil Junkers passenger jet enters service in the Deutsche Lufthansa. Most of Europe learned German instead of English. The European governments provide financial incentives to women to encourage them to have more children. Eugenics, the practices to improve the genetic quality of a population. Forced sterilization, abortions, marriage prohibition. Eugenics was present in Germany since the Nuremberg Laws, 1935. Criminals, people with disabilities, schizophrenic, anyone else considered to be idle and weak, but also dissidents, could be deemed unfit for reproduction and sterilized. Even who scored in the low ranges on IQ tests could be sterilized. It is compulsory for both marriage partners to be tested for hereditary diseases in order to preserve the racial purity. The DNA profiling is already present in 1960. Interracial relationships are taboo in Europe and America. In some case, it's a crime for individuals to wed someone belonging to a different race. In Germany, the killing of psychiatric patients or with physical disabilities identified as life unworthy of life, lebensunwertes Leben, is formally prohibited, but there is legal immunity for everyone who took part in it. Abortion is prohibited to the European women. Abortion in 1960, however, is prohibited in all the world. The Aryan concept has been diluted. Almost all German Allied are honorary Aryan. They are not recognized as belonging to the Aryan race, but informally considered to be part of it. Italians, French, Spanish, Czech, Slovakians, Finns, Bulgarians, Romanians, Croatian, Hungarians, and Turks are honorary Aryans, as well Indians and Persians, considering Aryans arrived from there.
Interesting choice of
Many
countries
Arabs
there.
who served in the Wehrmacht's Free Arabian Legion against the British during the Second World War are granted honorary Aryan status. Himmler himself had romantic notions about the Bosnian Muslims. Being Axis on the winning side, you would see Nazism and fascism not so evil. Something like communism in our days. Who win the war is always a good guy. Europeans read history as seen from Germany's point of view. Germany and Italy are regarded as the world's liberators from the evils of Bolshevism capitalism. Stalin and Churchill are held responsible for the Second World War. Strong emphasis is placed on reminding children that Britain and France declared war first. We would see a lot of videos and photos of starving Indians and other members of the British colonies. The European gamers spend all their time shooting allies instead of Nazis. In USA, the bad guys are the Japanese, and the word Holocaust refers to the Japanese who slaughtered around 30 million Chinese. The American intervention in Vietnam does not happen, so there is no reflection in American culture. No films as Apocalypse Now, Platoon. Rambo 2 could possibly be set in Cuba. In this timeline, the US, after the loss of Europe, cannot also lose Cuba and back Batista to keep him in power. In 1953, they land significant forces on the island after Castro attacked the Moncada barracks. The Castro's nascent revolution is canceled. Incidentally, the Vietnam War was won in 1953 by the French, thanks to the German help, as was the war in Algeria. In both cases, there are no major consequences in culture and cinematography. The Holocaust happens the same with all its horrors, but after the war, the Germans become more pragmatic, and the few Jews remaining in Europe are forced to emigrate. They could have the citizenship revoked, loss of the properties as it was before the war. Part of the European Jews emigrates to Palestine, but there will be no Israel. The attempts of Germanization in the East gave few results. There weren't enough Germans to carry out this goal, and Germany simply didn't need all that fertile land in the East. It could perfectly pay its way by means of its industry. In Europe, born a kind of hippie movement, the Lebensreform. life reform. Criticism of industrialization, search for a simple, natural, and healthy way of life, ecology, vegetarian diet, body culture, nudism, habits presumed to have been followed by the ancient tribes of Germany, or by the Romans in Italy, or the Celts in France. It was popular mostly between the bourgeoisie, but also among Nazi Party officials, including Himmler. But after the war, it became popular among the youth too. Women in Nazi Europe are excluded from all positions of responsibility, notably in the political and academic spheres.
Of course.
The fascist regimes permit and encouraged women to fill the roles of mother and wife only, as in the rest of the world, however. After the war, many German women did indeed become Nazi Party members. Gudrun Himmler, one of them. The women's liberation movement will emerge later, but it will emerge the same. Most of the cultural changes had little to do with who is sitting in the Reichstag. This is how could be the life in the Nazi-fascist Europe. What would happen next? Other wars, for sure. But for the moment, we are in peace.
That's pretty interesting. It kind of reminds me of a lot of The Man in High Castle, the show. There was a very similar idea as well, that what would happen if Germany actually won. Germany and Japan won the Second War. And there they actually went a bit further because Germany took over America as well. Like the east of America was under German control and the west of America was under Japanese control. So, but yeah, that would be... It was probably true. That's probably what would happen. They were going for that Aryan thing, cleanness of the race and things like that, and yeah, it was probably would be enough if Nazis decided to do something else later or earlier or something like that, change their plans a bit, and everything would go differently. That's what it is in the history. If they would do this that way instead of that way, something else will happen. So very good video. Very, very well done. All those. Okay, anyway, I'm just glad that it didn't happen. Because I was born in Poland, and apparently as a Polish I wouldn't have that Aryan status. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!